This is VP Barts in London and also Qmsu Deputy President. And welcome to tonight's debate. So, welcome to the Executive Officer question time for 2022. Tonight we've got questions, we've got candidates from all 6 of these sabbatical student positions, and this is your chance to have discussions with them to find out who's going to lead next year's SU. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. So, here's what we're going to do tonight. Unlike previous years, there's no time watching, there's no clocks ticking down, we're not playing countdown tonight. You have as much time as you want to facilitate more of a discussion and a debate on topics. I've got some pre-prepared questions, but I really want to hear from people watching online at home or those in the room. I'm more than happy to talking that much. I kind of want you to try and facilitate. So even to candidates, to other candidates, try and think of a couple of questions, okay? Each candidate role, name and course they study, and then we're going to move on to questions. And with those questions, if you can try and make them so that any candidate within that position can ask it, so nothing direct, I can always reword them if needed. So I can try and remind you of the question if you forget, if I can also remember, but just let me know. And then we'll do a couple of rounds of that, and then we'll end with a 1-minute closing speech. Live streamed on YouTube, which is also going out on social media. So just be a little careful with what you say, just remembering that everything is also online. And on that, just let some of our staff know, okay? And for those candidates that tonight can't make it, some of the candidates have sent in a statement that Alvin, the Deputy CEO of Qmsu, is going to read aloud. And the final reminder is student staff protocol. If you can't mention SU staff, just because they can't actually reply back to anything tonight. Right, I'm hoping that's the most that I'm going to have to speak this entire evening. So we're going to start today with VP Communities.
So Radhika sent in a statement, so I'm going to read out a statement. Reject. Cool. Hi everyone, I'm sorry I cannot be in person today. I'm undergoing a major surgery in 2 days and have been asked to self-isolate ahead of the surgery. As some of you may already know me, I have really enjoyed working in this role and working with many of you. I want to continue working on my Nightline project, alumni cafes, working with international students and also on women's safety and safety for the LGBT+ community to make QM a better and safer place for everyone. Please go and vote for me today to be your Vice President Communities 2022 to 2023. Thank you for your time and hopefully see you guys soon once I'm back from surgery.
That is for Vice President Barts and the London. Yeah.
Sure.
So hi everyone, my name's Charlie. I'm a fourth year medic intercalating this year in biomedical engineering, and I'm running to be your VP Barts in London this year.
We're going to start with a question from me, and then we're going to hit out from the audience, so you can have a think of any questions, the same as also online. So, as I said, this is a bit more of a discussion, we're not going to have.
Sure.
So, my initial bit is that the LSA obviously represents more than just medicine, more than just dentistry.
Yeah.
How do you think we should be adapting more to be able to focus on different students, whether that's from students from allied courses or also just students in general?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of conversation the last few years about kind of having a little shuffle around of the BLSA, and I think if I were to do that in my presidency year, I would want to focus a lot on the other students, kind of non-medical or dental. Kind of having an allied courses rep, a single allied courses rep on the BLSA doesn't necessarily represent how different all of those allied courses are, and I don't think that's exactly fair to the people that are on those courses. So a point of action for me would be to implement in that reshuffle kind of a allied courses representative from each of the different courses that we have at Barts. In that hope, we maybe get some more engagement through kind of having a specific rep, and then hopefully things can go from there. But I think they could bring more to the discussion than I could, because I don't do those courses. Do you know what I mean? So I think having those people there would be a really good asset to the BLSA.
I'm going to probe a little bit more on that one, and then I'm going to. So you mentioned the reshuffle. I had also looked into doing a reshuffle, and what else would you do apart from kind of the allied course?
Sticking with education zone, I think the idea of preclinical and clinical reps is not necessarily outdated, but it doesn't quite represent the style of education that we have at Barts.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily saying that I have a solution, but that would be something that I would want to work with education zone to fix. Because having those two very separate reps doesn't necessarily correlate with what we study.
I've been trying to think of somebody names.
Cool one. Yeah, I'm not saying I have an instant solution, but that is something I want to look at.
Has anyone got any questions in the audience? Ask anything for Charlie. Shy, it's the start of the evening. Has anyone got any questions? Fine, if you see that.
How would you go forward with that?
Question number one.
No, that's a question I was expecting, to be honest. It's a big thing at the moment. I think it would be unfair to the people that are currently doing the campaign to run off with my own 100,000 ideas. So I think a lot of that would be, if I were to get the role, would be working with Rob and the rest of the people that are doing the We Are BL campaign to see what their plans are going forward. You know, I think the idea is that we don't want to be running this campaign forever. It's not a permanent project. So rationale, aims and objectives, looking at kind of what we want to achieve from it and seeing if it is a necessity for next year, and if it is, it would be working with who are currently doing it. And obviously I imagine that they have a lot of plans for it, so I wouldn't want to get in the way of what I would consider quite a concrete plan at this point.
One thing that you would have done differently about
Is interesting. If I was to do something differently, I think potentially getting more QM involvement. You know, as much as this is a very specifically Barts and the London issue, generally speaking, having senior executives at the university not listening to students' demands is an issue that affects everybody. And so I think getting a little bit more involvement from Queen Mary's side of the Students' Union would have been a really, really good help with that, I think. That's something that maybe I would have slightly adapted, but that's the only thing I can think of.
any other. Let's go with another one of mine. Alongside with that, there's the looming UKMLA following year. How?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is better communication with the SSLC and the education reps. So it is difficult with courses like medicine, dentistry, where you have kind of government regulated bodies that dictate what exams you take. There's not as much kind of license to do what you like. But I think working through maybe SSCs and things like that, where we do have that extra time throughout the year, especially in your kind of years 1 and 2 of medicine, that would probably be where I would want to implement kind of new ideas. But yeah, as I say, it's very difficult to adapt a course that is, nationally, regulated. So yeah, difficult question, definitely.
Any questions? Start the night. We're all shy. I was shy until I had to start. So VP of Qmsu.
Yeah.
How do you think you'd balance those issues where you have a lot of things that are specific for SMD, but also you're a representative for a university as a whole? How do you think you'd balance those two?
Yeah, it's a very difficult balancing act, but I think maybe splitting my time between campuses would be really useful for that. Obviously, we do have the BLSA office, and that's kind of seen as the proverbial home of the BLSA president, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I think communication with the other SABs would be really useful for that. Again, as I say, my experience is BLSA oriented, and so obviously the QM side of that would be something that I would have to work on, but something that I'd be happy to educate myself with. So, yeah, again, very difficult question, not something that I've immediately thought of, but again, I would educate myself.
Well, that's the point of these. That's the point of these. That's the point of these conversations anyway. To kind of hit on that, so you talked a little bit about your past experiences and kind of what you've done in BLSA.
Yeah.
What's something that you'd be looking forward to being able to do differently, new in?
I think what I'm quite excited for is, you know, you've got however many people running for BLSA positions, and they've all got their own amazing ideas for it. You know, I could come up with a manifesto of 30 pages, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything when I'm not letting them pursue their own passion projects within their rep roles. I'm really excited to see all of these different avenues. I've been, you know, looking at manifestos and things like that, and I'm just really excited to see these individuals. And one thing that I want to do differently, I suppose differently, or something new that I've not done before, is helping them achieve those goals. I'm really excited for that.
A bit of a tough one. This is a bit of a tough one. I imagine, like a lot of people at the moment, am thinking a lot about the Ukrainian and Russian situation. What do you think is the place for Students' Union around large international problems like that? Is it releasing statements? Is it, you know, what do you actually do to help when humongous issues arise?
Yeah.
It's not to say that this is
Okay.
however many hundred miles away.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think to answer that, I think the role of a students' union is to represent and kind of and look after students. I mean, that's realistically its number one goal. That's why it's there. It's a union for students, and so I think when you have that massive kind of global issues that affect students, and specifically that affect students at your institution, I don't think you can be quiet about that. But again, I think that's a lot of listening to the voices of your students. And again, as I say, if there are students that are affected, which, as I'm sure with this crisis there are, I think it's our place to look after them students and to make sure that all of their welfare issues are addressed. In terms of solving global conflicts with an SU, slightly harder. But as I say, I think it's being realistic with our goals and just making sure that our students are safe and happy.
One more I had was, we've got a lot of reporting structure.
Yeah.
And it is a really good system. I think a lot of them on placements aren't whistleblowing. Why aren't they utilised, do you think?
Yeah, I think that comes a lot down to the culture of medicine. It obviously, in any profession, it's really hard to speak about your peers, your supervisors, people below you even. And that's such a hard thing to do, and I think that's just generally a problem with the medical culture. You know, you go on a ward and you are taught to, you know, fear the consultants, stay out of their way, or, you know, this reg, that reg, you know, and they're always seen as so above you that you can't do anything if you do see a problem. I think increasing the communication about these issues, about these reporting structures, and saying, you don't have to sit back and watch this. I think just increase communication with that. It's a difficult one to communicate well, because you can't just say to students, you know, you can dob on all your registrars or whatever. You have to word that very carefully, but making sure that they are aware of that system and that there is no pressure in doing it, not doing it. You know, it's there for your help and not because you have to. I think we've got a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
or they can't make a difference. What are your thoughts, or what are your plans in terms of making every student aware that their voice matters and that they, whilst a lot of them think that their voice alone doesn't matter, that really all their voices together can be quite a meaningful force.
Okay. Yeah. Really interesting question. I think. I think it's definitely the role of the executives, especially, and the entire Qmsu to. I mean, that is what the Qmsu is for. It's to be the voice of the students, but bridging the gap between your, average student that goes to lectures and goes home or whatever to the Qmsu and BLSA who work tirelessly to help them. I think that's the important step. Simple things like drop-in sessions or kind of office hours and things like that, or kind of systems whereby they can communicate with their kind of representatives, making that as streamlined as possible. That's step one. But I think the larger issue there is the culture. We need to let them know. Obviously, they know that their representatives are here for them or whatever, and they represent them on student council and things like that. But making sure that, maybe realizing that they want to hear your voice, rather than, oh yeah, you can email them if you want. It's no, we actively want to hear from you, and changing that culture would take time, but there are definitely steps we can take.
Let's move on to 1 minute closing statement.
Yeah. So the BLSA is a fantastic institution and not one seen at many medical schools nationwide. In order to preserve this and to continue to celebrate the amazing culture that we have at Barts and QM, we'll need someone with a wealth of experience in every nook and cranny of the BLSA. I've been a sports club president on multiple committees, and I've also been on the BLSA board before. This puts me in an amazing position to lead the BLSA with experience and amazing passion for the community. More than anything, I'm willing to put in the time and effort to listen to the wants of the students. That is our role as your union, and so I'd remain as open book all year to address any concerns or suggestions from students, QM or BL. I urge you all to exercise your right to vote, and I'd love for you all to put your faith in me for BLSA president next year. Thanks very much.
Wow, pretty well done. Not easy to. So, next we're doing the Vice President of Welfare. Yeah. We've got a statement first from Alvin, from one of the candidates. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, fine, no worries. Let's do very quick introductions.
I'm Jodo. I'm a third year pharmacology student.
Fab. I'm again going to start with a question from myself. But again, people are going to be having a think in the room about questions. My first one was about when students start here, especially now during COVID, that adjustment is really hard. I found it really, really hard. What support do you think that Qmsu needs to offer more to students when they start here at uni?
I think to start out with, it's like getting in contact with students. I think a lot about student support is about students going to find support. And if you're, like having this big jump, you're not necessarily going to be like first thing, or let's email people I don't know. So I think kind of putting the students in a position where the support comes to them would be quite helpful. And also just like a big encouragement for like the involvement of societies and like sports, because I think a lot of people also find it easier to go to, for example, like a friend that they've made at a sport. Like a lot of sports and societies have welfare officers, rather than going to emailing someone they've never seen the face of. So I think support coming to the students, as well as more support pushed through societies and sports, be a good place to start.
Any questions in the room for Jojo?
About international students particularly, they somehow experience social setback or cultural shock. So they have to start with things, and there's a very simple question as to where should I start from? And
I think kind of like importantly, your question has not an amazing answer from me, but like it kind of highlights that I have my uni experience and it's like not the same as a lot of other people, groups. I think to answer your question, I'm just going to have to work closely with, for example, like the international reps to understand their experiences, and for like the different groups that isn't like the typical. Because I just don't have the experience to make myself. But we do have there's so many positions, so like there is so many people to speak. They would have had a better start to uni or start first year. Is the best way to go about that for me.
I have questions. Anyone else got any questions in the room? What I wanted to ask, there's a lot of conversations about decolonise the curriculum that comes from students at this university. What do you believe we should be lobbying for with decolonisation and kind of working towards for students? It is a good question. It's a good question.
I think like almost like these students are a lot more educated about these topics. Well, not necessarily all students, but like a lot of students are a lot more educated about these topics than like lecturers or like necessarily like uni staff. I think it's like really important to like connect like the people who know the most about it to the you know the staff creating curriculums, etc. Rather than like putting it to the staff that needs to be changed, where it's like not necessarily going to be changed in the way that students actually know that it would be best to. So,
That's okay. That's okay.
it's not really a topic that I have the best knowledge about, but definitely is something that I would have to educate myself more.
Anything from the room, Charlie?
I suppose particularly in STEM, there's a big conversation at the moment with widening participation. So kind of getting people in from low-income backgrounds, kind of every different kind of. My question is, what do you think is the role of VP welfare and the Qmsu in lobbying for better widening participation, particularly in STEM?
I guess for in terms of welfare, like I guess that does include like financial welfare and things. For example, low-income backgrounds. I do think it's just important to like promote that anyone can choose a role that wouldn't necessarily be like stereotypically for that kind of person, and that they can still have a good uni experience despite whatever background that they've come from. And it definitely is something that's important for a lobby for. How they would do that, I haven't yet thought of. But yeah, definitely should be like an involvement, especially like with the welfare, because I think that's the problem, that a lot of people wouldn't feel supported. Like, and I think maybe like more of an awareness before uni. Like when I was applying to uni, welfare isn't really a conversation at all. And for these students, I think it'd be important that that's more of a conversation, more promoted when they're applying and things like that, and the kind of support that they can get, such as like bursaries, if financial issues is the case.
Great, thanks.
That's a really good answer. It's a really important question. I mean, when I do, I know it's not about me, when I do intro talks, I tell new incoming students and also their parents about how many sessions of counselling you can get for free from advisor counselling, because it's not really talked about enough, and it is really useful. Anyway, not bad. Yes.
I'm going to keep it very, very open-ended, but in terms of, I think you spoke about this slightly in the manifesto, but also the past 2 years have highlighted how important mental health is.
Yeah.
Mental health. What are your plans for mental health support?
I think one thing, because I guess it was kind of like the forefront for me because it kind of affected me, is that like a lot of students get passed from their like advisor to like student support to DDS to, and you kind of just, and that happened to me, kind of ended up just at a loose end. And I think to put it simply, is that like whoever the student ends up going to, I'd like there to be like a place put in plan that then is followed up like by their advisor or whatever to them, rather than if that plan starts to like derail, they just kind of end up getting no emails from anyone. But like some of the things is just like waiting times. Some people I know, they've like ended up waiting like 3 weeks between appointments and things, which isn't exactly ideal. And yeah, like same with like what I was saying about like freshers, is that there's more outreach from support staff to the students, that it's not always the other way around. That would be my general starting points.
It's from in the room. Any other questions? Yes, no. I think just in general, I feel like coming out of like all of these restrictions, I feel like life is very overwhelming for a lot of people. Like we've kind of gone from doing nothing, especially if you had quite an active life before COVID, you go back to doing all those things at once, and like it's pretty overwhelming. I think that's a bit of a struggle for students to kind of keep up with their work, and they feel like they're missing out. And also like the pressure that we've spent so long not being able to do anything. I feel like people think they feel pressure to do like make the most of their time, and I feel like that can create quite a lot of like anxiety, that you're missing out, or you should be making more of your time, or taking on too much and then just burning out. I think that's kind of a big issue for a lot of people right now. Any questions? How about we move to 1 minute closing statements? That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of want to do this job just because I'm passionate about helping people, and it would be exciting for me to be actually helping like peers. And as I kind of mentioned, just my main mission would be that whatever issue a student runs into, be it like financial, academic, like just mental welfare, that there's something put in place, that they know there's action that's going to change, and if that action isn't moving on fast enough, that they get contacted and they don't just get left at a loose end. So yeah, vote for me if you think that's a good idea.
So Jojo wasn't the only candidate. Nicole unfortunately wasn't able to be here, so Alvin's going to read a statement sent in from her.
I'm Nicole Munn, running for VP Welfare. I apologise that I couldn't attend this evening. However, I would like to stress to you just how important you all are to me. I'm a third-year student about to graduate, and I'm able to invest 100% of my time into well-being of you all. I'm aware of the issue of QMUL, and I want to address the issues whilst being in VP Welfare. The issues that are concerning are mental health, to which I would like to provide support to all candidates by giving them a listening ear, as well as advocate support elsewhere. I would like to stress to you, but I know how it feels to be a student at Queen Mary. I haven't had the greatest of times myself. I now want to make a change in my QMUL. Any questions that you would like answered, or any issue you would like raised to me, please don't hesitate to contact me on Instagram @Nick4VP Welfare, or find me on campus to where I can be able to chat to you and address any concerns.
Wow. Next up, we've got for Vice President of Science Engineering. So, if we can do quick introductions.
Hello everyone, my name is Munia. I graduate.
I'm going to kick off with a question for myself, and again, then I'll pass back to everyone else. My first question is, how do you think you'd work with the other faculty VPs? So, as VP S&E, you'd also be working with VP BL and VP HSS. So how do you think you'd work with them to ensure that common issues are jointly addressed across the university, so they're co-created, so that you're sharing ideas?
Yeah, I think I'm in a good position because I've been able to sort of observe like the relationship with the kind something alone, you're wasting resources.
questions from the room? Yes.
So, you're VP Welfare now, and you're running for SME. So I was just interested to know, why did you make the switch? What was there, some sort of motivation for it? Is it something you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. I'll mention like I guess the biggest one. When I came into VP Welfare, the biggest sort of priority amongst all of the priorities was like, you know, you wait for an issue to come up and then you throw something at it like why is the issue coming up in the first place? You know, is our system formed in a way that actually policies? And we found, and like me coming in, for me, like if I was to ask that question to myself of what is stressing students out the most, it is your degree, right? And so the reason why I'm going into science and engineering, even whilst I was in VP Welfare, I found myself delving into that education side of things. All sorts of things. The way that the university gives bad news to people was another. So I'm still welfare. Going in with like welfare concerns of how can we make the system actually better so that we can be flagged for plagiarism or something like that.
You mentioned about problems with how the university delivers bad news. Could you kind of develop on that a little bit? What do you think we could change?
So I spoke to whilst I was in the role. He had like similar ideas, and I think there are certain things that you can deliver over emails. There are certain things that you can't. Even just something as simple as not giving people bad news on a Friday at 5 o'clock. I think simple things like that, and even just the wording. Sometimes, like I remember one staff was saying how the email, like when you're deregistered, is just like this red capital of you've been deregistered from your course. Not exactly nice. So I think there's a lot can be done in terms of just reviewing the communication, the timing of communications, and how, you know, not everything needs to be done by email.
Any questions in the room? I'll go to another one of mine. Often in SAB student roles, there's a huge amount of work going on under the scenes. You're inputting into a lot into the university that people don't really see, perhaps. What would be one single change that you'd want to make next academic year?
One, like, just given off the general timetabling of, you know, having like a lecture at 9 a.m. and then 4-hour break and then a lecture at 4 p.m. or, you know, timetabling from like in times where you can't, like for example Fridays 1 to 2 p.m. a lot of people, they can't just go to teaching activity because of Friday prayers, stuff like that. I think timetabling is one that's such a big piece of work, and you will have, so it's like that thing with a certain amount of work.
Anything anyone in the room wants to ask?
What makes you want to run for this position? Second year in a row.
Want to run again? Yeah, so as in, I think it's quite straightforward. I've got unfinished business. Yeah, as in like in the welfare, like the welfare sort of scene, a lot of my manifesto points were covered, right? So like bursary payments are now, you know, in November, and societies are more or less back to normal. all those things. Stuff that are left happen to be the education stuff, and so it makes sense for me to move into. And so I think in the faculty VP. Is a big thing because to me, I feel like they're doing.
Is an issue that uniquely affects students of the science and engineering faculty, and how do you intend to address it?
Science and engineering, just because of the way like the assessments are quite exam heavy for some like courses, and then sometimes like the assignments are very particular. One thing that students tend to complain about is like the time. Science and engineering, sometimes the work that you're requiring, specialist software, like I remember when we were doing something out and to run like a program on that, it would take like hours, and then you've got all of this stuff. So I think like the scheduling of assignments and courseworks and exams in general as well is something that could be improved. Science and engineering is very inconsistent. Some places, some schools are doing like 24 hours, some schools. Hours, time limits, and obviously students in different schools, it's not like that. So a lot of the time when it comes out, people are comparing like, oh, what do you have exams? I wish I was all that stuff. So I think that is a big.
Anything else from the room? I'm going to ask one final question. Thinking about it as education as a faculty VP role, how do you think that SU reps who are undergrads can represent postgrad students better?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think and we have to understand again like the so I think just liaising with them and making sure that I'm waiting for people to come to us, but actually going out proactively and seeing is it.
Let's move on to your 1 minute closing statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we're still, you know, really COVID. It's not gone away. Feel like again, I'm not like switching sort of mindsets. I'm just switching roles. So I'm still VP welfare. That might mean, if I win, is that this SAB team will have 2 VP welfares. I think that's the kind of SAB team that we're going to need to move forward.
Very well done. We're going to do a quick 10-minute break, all right? Yeah, so
Okay. Because I do
Base your student. No, yeah, so just go just check. I think so. Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. And so yeah, when you're actually working, if you were running research.
Two.
Two.
Two. Two.
Can you tell people about the question and speak up in the camera?
I used to actually
Or you repeat the question.
Yeah, the base software.
That's what I did say.
I don't know if it's the actual microphone.
Depends on the person. Someone who's
the adapter, sometimes it's just like the wire. Is if you just directly use that little short lead, it's worth trying. It's just the wire, not now, but like
No, but would,
I don't think it would work. It might work now, but I'm just wondering because it's like before you bin it, that's the one thing to
no,
try.
I think, can you move it to the back of the tape? Because that is yeah, no, yeah.
What's that again? What's that again?
Actually, no, actually, it's okay.
Okay, welcome back. Next up, we're going to do is Vice President Humanities and Social Sciences. So there's 2 candidates for this one. So if we can do very quick introductions.
I'm Rose, I do comparative literature. Hi everyone, I'm Zainab. I studied English and History. I'm doing my Masters in Politics and International Relations, and I'm the current Vice President for Humanities and Social Sciences.
Fab. I'm going to start again with one of my questions, and then again, if you can all have a think of anything that you'd like to ask both candidates. My first question, I'm going to start with strikes. As you all both know, we're currently facing industrial action at this university, much of which affects HSS, due to which union is striking. What do you think is the place of Qmsu on this issue, and what more do you think we should be doing? If we start with you, Rose.
Yeah, so I've spoken about this in my manifesto because the UCU strikes have been one of the biggest impactful things since I started uni. I've been from going on campus to off campus during COVID, and coming back on campus in my final year and being hit with strikes again. It's getting to a point now where it's kind of ridiculous because people aren't taking into consideration how much it affects mental health of students, but also not being able to access staff towards deadlines, especially at the end of the year. It's kind of disappointing and also disheartening to a degree. So the way that I think the Qmsu should be, I think it's definitely our place to get involved and sort of make sure that we're supporting students through the time, making sure that there's on-campus activities going on, or something to sort of think about their well-being, like something in the Student Union Hub, for example, which is obviously a place that a lot of students hang out during the day, especially commuters, because we have loads of commuters on campus. But I guess obviously it would be nice to take into consideration everyone's opinions on the strikes. I personally support the strikes. But I think it's also our place to try and work with them to sort of lobby their issues as well as the issues that are affecting students. So staff are being given a hard time, and Colin Bailey is completely shutting down their pay for striking. And I think we need to understand why they're striking in order to understand how we can help students and they can help us help students at the same time. So we all know about the UCU strikes, and obviously the SU's position is always to support the students first. And it is difficult when there are external stakeholders here, and it's like UK for staff fighting for their pensions. I'm sure everyone sort of supports and sympathises with staff having to go on strike continuously, and of course the biggest impact on that is students. And I think the best way we can support them, and I've been doing this continuously, is to figure out what their assessment deadlines will look like, go to meetings and advocate for students and full on tell them that Colin Bailey is wrong in his position to not listen to staff and send out blunt emails saying that they would dock their pay, because this is obviously impacting staff. The university is saying that they care about the student experience, but technically they don't if what they're doing is impacting staff and staff are reacting negatively to this. So I think what we can do is, to our fullest extent, support students, talk to them about their assessments, and this is something we did continuously, going around campus and asking students on their feedback, what they think about the strikes and what we can do better for them. Obviously these strikes aren't going to go away, and I think that's the hard reality for us, because the education sector is looking more like they care more about their money investments rather than students and their experiences, which we as the SU should focus on the classroom, what students think, how they feel, and how they are negatively being affected. And if that means we ask the staff if they can reschedule their classes, what is the best way of going about that? The best way of going about that is not pushing it to reading week. It is engaging in different outputs, sort of doing it online. If there are other tutors who can teach you the similar thing, do that. If there's extra material to support your education, I think that's the best way of going about it, continuously talking to the staff and putting your foot down and telling Colin Bailey and the university that what they're doing is absolutely wrong, and they're working with other universities who are working in solidarity with students across the sector, and then going that what they're doing is wrong, because students have the biggest input we pay £9,000 tuition every year. The university will not survive if we don't pay our tuitions. So I think students have the biggest impact and the biggest voice in this university. So it would come to collectively working together and sort of making our voice heard and standing up to the university, essentially.
In these bits with more candidate, you don't have to each go separately.
Oh, okay.
If you no, just say if you wanted to add anything now before we move on, you absolutely can, and vice versa. Okay. But is there any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. So Rob kind of asked this question earlier to Jojo, but I wanted to ask it to a VP of Education. How would you go about decolonizing education?
Well, I'm currently studying comparative literature and culture, and luckily I have a very diverse sort of curriculum. I get to study loads of different subjects from all around the world and study different languages, etc. And I'd say obviously my experience is unique to me, and not every student gets that opportunity. So I think firstly we need to start with curriculum and staff, because humanities is quite diverse currently, but I think we still need to push that further in order to make sure that we're pushing for a range of subjects to have loads of different ethnic backgrounds, loads of ethnic staff, especially lectures from staff about their own personal experiences. And I think, again, just pushing that Colin Bailey puts a bit of, understands that there are staff from BAME and women who are being underpaid, and he needs to resolve that issue. Again, it works with the strikes exactly like what they're lobbying for. We need to sort of make sure we're understanding all of the people in the humanities and social sciences sector. I also still don't have all of the experience, and I haven't got the chance to step into a role and be given sort of a wider range of information. But if I do get the wider range of information in the role, then I know that that's something I'd definitely be pushing for.
With that question, I think I care so much about decolonizing education. I take it really personally when people say that they don't believe in decolonization or diversity, especially in humanities and social sciences, where there's 9 schools and there are barely any black or ethnic lecturers that we have. I have never been taught in undergrad or in my postgraduate by any ethnic or black lecturer. And I think that that's really sad to a lot of students, because they always quote that Queen Mary is the most diverse university of its kind, but a diverse and inclusive university also needs to decolonize education to go with that and reflect the student body. I think there aren't always opportunities for students to talk about institutional racism, systemic racism as well in this university, when there aren't open and honest discussions about race and racism and what it's like for BAME staff or LGBT staff, because essentially no one cares. And I think that that's where it comes to having a liberated education, where we can openly talk about those things, and we have curriculum that also enhances this. Because I think even in a lot of humanities subjects, we learn from such a European standpoint. It's white and it's Western, and you don't really get the opportunity to delve into other areas. We talk about America, we talk about Britain, we talk about Europe, but no one really cares about Latin America. No one studies that. There's not always an opportunity in modules to learn about that. The Middle East exists, Southeast Asia exists, China exists, all these different places exist, but those aren't included in the curriculum at all. Reading lists are not diverse. It's not easy to just have 1 or 2 writers, a woman writer, a black writer, and that's it. We need to continuously talk about this, have BAME staff as academics, because in the UK at the moment there's only 1% of lecturers. In the UK, that's like 22,000 lecturers. There's only about 100 black lecturers, which is really sad, because we don't get that representation, we don't get to learn about these things. And it also has that knock-on effect on your mental health when you're not seeing these people in these positions to even aspire to be an academic. So I think that it's really critical, and I think that we need to keep talking about these. We need to keep working with the national student bodies as well, like NUS, who are really at the forefront of decolonizing education as well.
Charlie.
I feel it's only fair, because I asked the same question for science and engineering. What's a unique issue that affects humanities and social science students, and what do you intend to do about it?
I came up with this. I can't even remember on my feet though. I think a unique issue to humanities and social that statement over and over again that humanities shouldn't be taught at university. And I think that's ridiculous because we're one of the biggest schools. Students, you can find them wherever you go. And also, the fact that we're not taken seriously is kind of disappointing and discouraging for people studying their degree. And so I would say it's more about pushing for our representation and pushing and telling the university, hey, we do matter. And obviously, I guess it's different for science and engineering because they get more funding due to obviously different beliefs from principal and vice principal about what subjects are more important. So I think it's again pushing for more funding and pushing for more representation among staff. Yeah, that's my opinion.
No, I definitely agree, because someone who did English, I always got told, you're doing a ridiculous subject, you should just become a teacher, or like really disregard me because I'm not doing something that's practical like law or engineering or something like that. But also I would add to that and say one of the issues is over-assessing students. I think we're assessed to the extent that it does have a knock-on effect on our mental health. As someone who did like a joint honours degree, I did modules from 2 different schools who never agreed with each other, never spoke to each other. You'd have multiple clashes, you'd have multiple assessments, all on the same deadline, and they weren't willing to sort of change those deadlines. So when I was a course rep, I also worked with students, and it was like, what matters to us is spreading out those deadlines, because we get referred to advice and counselling and different places going, why are you so stressed? And it's the smallest thing of just going, we need our deadlines spaced out. It's not enough for you just to be like, oh, work ahead of time, because we know as a student we work last minute, all-nighters. I've kind of run out of those, but we do just need to like have those conversations with staff. But I've also worked on that continuously as a course rep, and now we do have like an interdisciplinary coordinator who just focuses on working with joint honours, so we don't have those deadlines that are all clumped together. And now it's an exception on an EC to go, I have 3 deadlines all at the same time. There's absolutely no way I can finish this. So I think that's a critical issue as well, because then it has a knock-on effect on the students with disabilities and so on.
Cool, thank you. Questions in the room?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really great that you guys are so passionate about decolonization. I think we all are. But I was a bit disappointed in like both your manifestos that there wasn't much addressed to the LGBTQ+ community. Like, I am a member of that community, and so many people in HSS are. And so this is addressed to both of you. Like, I'd really appreciate if you could discuss like where we fit into this kind of policy.
Yeah, well, I identify as an LGBT person. I'm a queer woman, and I've obviously worked within the LGBT society, and I've gone to different events, and it sort of is quite interesting to see how students will sort of like help sort of like make the stigma around coming out not so difficult. And to me, I didn't put in any LGBT policies specifically because I can only speak from a queer standpoint. So I'd like to work with LGBT students within the School of Humanities and Social Sciences so that I can understand all sexualities, because if I'm just understanding from my perspective, I don't really get the chance to, because sexuality is a unique experience for everyone. Everyone feels different about how they have to. Some people don't have accepting backgrounds, and some people don't have accepting friends. I've had that in my experience, and coming to university, it's nice to be open for a change and have people accept you. So on the humanities and social sciences perspective, I'd really like to encourage more modules on sexuality. So I got to take last year on the subject of sex, and it was about sexuality, and then they rerun a different module on it this year in comparative literature. But I was shocked to find out that that was the first time that module had been run last year. We're one of the only universities of that kind to be running those types of modules. So I think it's important to be spreading that across the curriculum, into history modules, into business modules if possible, to talk about like LGBT students and where they are on in the business sector. And then also running events on campus would be really important. But again, it's something I'd like to work on with the LGBT society, with LGBT students, and get feedback from them on their unique perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. Obviously, I can't speak for the LGBT community. I work with a lot of people who are from that community, so I definitely understand that. When I talk about decolonizing, this is also an aspect that's also pushed to marginalized communities, not just Black and ethnic students, but also LGBT students, Muslim students, students from all different faiths, Jewish students as well. So when we do engage in different things like liberation campaigns, I always extend it to having it inside education as well. So inviting all the schools to also run events for students in all different communities. What is sad is that not all schools or faculties accept that, and they just see it as a liberation campaign that the SU run, or something that just societies run and only people from that community can engage in. But I think having an open discussion about them, that's why I always advocate for having an open discussion on racism, systemic discrimination as well, from anti-Semitic people who suffer from anti-Semitism, people who suffer from all those different stigmas. I think we don't have an inclusive community if we're always saying that I don't feel heard and you say you don't feel heard, then we don't actually have an inclusive community. I think including that in the modules, there are so many people on the sideline of history and we act like they don't exist. But having those conversations within classes, and even if it makes you uncomfortable, I don't really care if it makes everyone uncomfortable. If I can speak my truth and you can speak yours, then that's when we come together and sort of understand each other, rather than going, I disagree with your point of view, we're not going to speak about it ever, that's your own issue. That's why I feel like we should have these discussions. We also have things from advice and counselling, like we always mention these services that exist and that aren't always extended to all students. So it needs to be opened up, and we always need to talk about all different communities, not just from an SU liberation point of view, but it does need to span out through education as well.
Anything else anyone wants to ask in the room? Yeah.
What can the Students' Union do to make sure that senior university leaders are listening to students?
I'd say that it's important to be having meetings with senior university leaders, making sure that they sort of, the problem is trying to get university leaders to understand it's kind of like secondary school. When you go to a teacher and they kind of disregard you because you're a student, we need to be making sure that the people in the executive officer roles are pushing as adults and leaders and saying, no, my voice deserves to be heard. And it can't just be something that you bring this issue up once or twice and then they completely still shut it down. It needs to be constant, because when you put someone under pressure, then they're going to crack. So at the end of the day, we need to be doing stuff with like the vice president, the principal. We need to be pushing them. We need to be pushing different people at the top of our faculties. And we need to be making sure that they're listening to the issues that are being brought up by students, because time and time again, we've failed to, even the UCU is failing because Colin Bailey is completely not listening to them. It needs to be a constant push. It's going to take a long time, but hopefully it can slowly, over time, get better. But you've just got to keep pushing and making sure that they're seeing us as individuals and not just children, because we're not. We come to university, we pay for our degree, and it's important that we're making sure that we're valued and heard, which currently we're not.
With working with senior managers is really difficult, because I think they always come with their own point of view of when they thought they were students way back when. And so they have to understand that times have changed. Obviously, they never expected COVID to happen, and now we're working with different tech on like MME and so many different things. And constant feedback is really important. If the university is not listening to student feedback, then it's unnecessary, because that's when structures like having course reps and school reps help, especially for our positions, because I'm only one person, so I can't be everywhere at once. So having those students to be in those SSLCs are critical to have feedback, because I'm not in your classroom having that module experience with you. So it's important that students from all different modules and courses have that feedback, and then they're also trained and taught to gather that. And that's when we present it to the university, because without that much data, they can't really move on anything that they want to do. So if it comes to online MME not working, that's something that we faced during the entire first semester. We're not in all those classrooms, so it's important for students to be like, this isn't working and this isn't working. And then for me to push back at the university and say, this is what students think, this is what they're saying, you're not in their classroom, so you must listen and adapt. And I think some of those work because they did work with the tech. They got stewards in, they got student demonstrators to help and fix those issues. Because without that constant feedback from students like yourselves, the university isn't really going anywhere. They're not progressing, they're not being inclusive, they're not working with students from students this year will say something different from students the next year, and then that works across different faculties and it works at different grades. International foundation year students, postgraduate students, PhD students, all those students have different forms of feedback, and then it's up to us to collate that and then present that to senior leaders and push back on things that they probably won't agree with. Anyone here will tell you that if I don't agree with what senior managers say, I will push back and say that this isn't working and we need to collectively work together and sort of find a better vision and also work creatively. If this isn't working, then what about this? Like having different options and putting that on the table and then presenting it to people in a way that that's feasible, and then they can work together and understand. Thank you.
Questions in the room? Yes.
You both mentioned religion and faith, and some of faith. How would you make campus a more inclusive place for religions? It's very easy to feel isolated if there's no outreach from reps and that sort of department. So,
Yeah, well, I think we run a lot of events on campus at the moment, such as Islamophobia Awareness Month, Jewish Heritage Month, and especially considering that we're based around a Jewish cemetery, it's really important for us to be making sure that all people of all faiths are heard. For example, London's quite at an all-time high for anti-Semitic crimes, and I think it's important for us to be addressing this on campus and making sure that we are running forums, for example, for students of faith, and making sure that they have a chance to give feedback to executive officer staff so that we can deal with the problem rather than their voice be going unheard and them feeling like they don't have a chance to stand up for that. But for people of faith in different societies, I think it's about maintaining our facilities. So like Zainab said in one of her manifestos about protecting Friday prayer time, and I think that's a really good idea. I think it's really important, but also making sure that the Students' Union Hub is inclusive for all faiths, because St. Bennett's chaplaincy, but I feel like it's promoted enough for Christians and other people of different faiths. So I feel like we need to make sure that we're making that facility more accessible and more advertised to people, as well as other areas within the Students' Union Hub, and also just making sure that there's some sort of like meeting to, you know, speak to executive officers about what's going on, especially in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. I think we also need to make sure that we're incorporating how religion is taught in our curriculum, and are we seeing people who are of different religions as staff, and feeling like you have sort of someone you can go to regarding how you feel about your faith, or whether you feel like you can't access something on campus, and maybe making something available in a room of all of the humanities buildings, or in all of the buildings in general, for people to access.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I think after COVID, a lot of people did turn to faith, and we see that reflected in our societies, that the faith and cultural societies have gone up so high for students because that's something that they've decided to turn to, whatever reason, that's up to them. And we do have like facilities such as the Multi-Faith Centre that's shared across for Muslim students, for Jewish students, Sikh students, so everyone does have that safe space on campus. But I think, like, yeah, as Rose said, that obviously things are going on outside of campus, such as Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and that is something that's within our control to sort of create an anti-racist community at Queen Mary. For example, me being a Muslim student, or being a sabbatical officer, and being one of the only people in my space working with vice principals, I do get undermined a lot, and I see that as something that they're not open to, or that they've not experienced yet, because it's such an undiverse group of staff. So for me to always explain myself and to always be that representative for a lot of students, even if it's not just Muslim students, but someone of faith going, I'm advocating for you and I see you and you want to be seen by somebody in this position, because not a lot of people get that opportunity. But with the other VPs, we've also been working to protect Friday prayer, and also from 1 to 2 on Fridays, and also have the afternoon for Jewish students who are observing Sabbath, but also making sure that it's also an EC issue, that if you want a reasonable adjustment for saying, okay, I'm fasting today, or I need to pray, or I have a religious observance or a festival to go to, if it's Diwali for Hindu students, all of those need to be taken under consideration, and it's not always open. So I can't always go to my lecturer and go, I need to observe Eid, for example, and say I need a day off. I'm not able to complete my coursework, because for me that's a sacred day for me to celebrate. that's not always come to an understanding. It's always like, make sure you do your work regardless. But we're all human beings. We all have things that we do outside of education, and I think that needs to be reflected when it comes to students of faith or students who don't have faith, because that's also a option for students as well.
This conversation is really good, but for time, I think I'm going to do 1 minute closing statements. If we could start with you this time,
Okay,
Zainab.
of course. So I think like from the last 6 months as being Vice President for Humanities and Social Sciences, I found that because Humanities is such a huge school, there's 9 schools, and I haven't always had the opportunity to interact with all schools. I feel like I'm very passionate about education and making sure that students are heard and that this is an inclusive, fair and a supportive space for all students. I think that I've had the opportunity to be exposed to so much that's going on in the university, identified other issues that I want to work on, which will last longer than 6 months, and that's why I decided to rerun, because this is an opportunity for me to also this is an opportunity for me to progress as well and support students. I'm actually really dedicated to working with different students as well. I've been an undergraduate student and a postgraduate student, so I feel like I am inclusive enough to work with different levels of students. I said students a lot. Yeah, that's why I think you should vote for me, is continue to rerun for this.
And then Rose, 1 minute closing statement.
So I'm always going to advocate for change over continuity. I think fresh voices, fresh faces are always important within anything, especially Qmsu. So obviously I'm going to say vote for me, because I really feel like a fresh voice in the humanities sector will be a great update for humanities and social sciences. And as a student ambassador, I've worked with postgrad students, prospective students, current students, and I feel like because of that I have sort of a diverse sort of view on what different students need. I've even watched students graduate, and it's been a really lovely experience, and I feel like it's important to make sure that every university student will deserve it. So hopefully you'll choose to vote for me.
Very well done, both. Well done. Okay, so last but not least, we're going to do the candidates for Qmsu president. If you want to join the front. Stand up. Yeah. Do it. Start. Say sound.
5.
Is it full?
I won't get. Okay, don't. Sabotaging.
I feel like I should be. I feel like I'm saying too much.
So we've got one statement from a candidate who's not here, so I think we're going to start with that. Okay.
Hello, my name is Shraboni Shruti and I'm currently pursuing my Masters in Artificial Intelligence. As my time as a postgraduate student at Qmsu draws to a close, I've taken the decision to run for president of our Students' Union. I believe I'm ready to represent your student voice in leading this exciting, inspiring and tenacious organisation because I feel I have so much to offer back to an organisation that has given me so much. This entails bringing new, innovative ideas to the university to improve your experiences as a Queen Mary student, with you at the centre of any changes made. My primary goal is to boost awareness of our student union, as well as Qmsu's organisations, societies and volunteer opportunities. I would bring to the post of student president leadership, commitment and innovation, as well as a strong work ethic and a positive mental attitude. I want to see more power in the hands of students over the next year, and this will be an underlying goal of whatever changes I make during my term. It will be my goal to guarantee that all student voices are heard. My final aim is to increase communication between the Students' Union and the students to try and provide everyone with regular updates on what the Student Union is doing to improve the experience of all students. I ask nothing but your votes. I would be deeply honoured if you would vote for me on the election day.
Can we, as always, start with quick introductions?
Hi, my name is Kazi Islam. I'm a final year business management student.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a final year English language and linguistics student.
Hi, my name is Adam Rook and I'm a third year politics student.
Hello, my name's Will. I graduated from University of Bath with an aerospace engineering degree, and I'm currently a pre-master's student studying business and management.
Hi everyone, my name is Adi and I'm I was studying electronic engineering and I'm the current president.
I'm going to, again, start with one question for myself. And if you, after you've already spoken, want to add something, come back at something someone else has said, in a friendly manner, obviously, don't feel like you have to go down the line. It's a conversation, it's a discussion, and we have plenty of time. So I'm going to start with my first question, which is, working with the senior leadership within the university is tough, which I can say from first-hand experience. What do you think your aims are to be building that relationship with these people? What would you do to maintain these? Why do you think it's important that we have a good relationship with the senior exec?
I think we can have a good relationship, but it's got to be constructive as well. So, as president, you can't just sit there and basically let them do what they want. Students have to come first. From my experience, I'm pretty sure that senior leaders at a university, they don't listen to students. I've even written 2 letters to Colin Bailey about compensation and the fact that students have been ignored from it. And surprise, surprise, I've had no response. So I think the president's job is just to lobby them as possible to make sure that they listen to us.
Yeah. I think it's really important to have a good relationship with the senior leadership. So I've previously had roles in like deputy head girl in my sixth form. I know that's completely different to this, and this is on a whole different level. But I always felt when I had a good relationship with these senior leaders, it really does help push ideas and push the students' needs through. And I think, as Adam was saying, like, we are being ignored, and I do think that we need to have that that conversation and have that have that relationship, a good relationship, so we can push for the students' needs. And yeah.
If I actually could come in here as well, I think something interesting about the senior leadership team, having worked with them for now 7 months, is I think it was hinted at one of the candidates for VPHSS, was that they sort of think about their time back in their experience when they were students and so on and so forth, and you can tell that intentions-wise, they intend good for students, but intentions is one thing, and I think something important is that there's 2 aspects, which is you need to keep a good relationship, because the Students' Union is actually independent from the university in terms of, we're a separate entity altogether. And so that means that we can't actually force change in the sort of the university level or the university structure. And unfortunately, that comes from the university itself, right? If Colin doesn't agree with something, it's not going to happen, right? As we've witnessed a few times. And I think that's something to realise, that you need to have a good relationship, but there are lines, that need to be drawn. And I think that's something I've seen, at times, in other universities and other students' unions with very different student demographics. It can end up that it's just essentially, we'll just, we don't want a good relationship, we're just going to campaign on everything. We're going to, say, essentially oppose everything that the university does. You need to have a good relationship so you can get some change, but there are times when you say, this clearly is not for our students, it's not for the benefit of our students, and frankly, you've crossed the line. And, it's that essential that them, re-emphasizing as well, that we as a students' union are the student voice, which sometimes I think the university love doing this thing where they're like, oh, we've consulted students, when really all they've done is actually been in the curve and listened to two different people say something, right? So it's that essentially, keeping a good relationship, but there are lines that have to be drawn, and there are times when they cross a line that you have to say.
I think it's very important to have a very good relationship with especially because if the president is able to communicate the issues of the union with them regularly, I think they're more inclined towards listening to those issues and actually doing something about it. And obviously, like any other relationship, you have to nurture it for it to be good. And I think one of the ways we can do that is by ensuring that the president is meeting with the senior leadership team, if not every week, at least every 2 weeks, and addressing the issues that are coming at your door every day, and making sure those are being addressed by the senior leadership team.
With the principal, that can sometimes be difficult, but I definitely say the senior team, definitely. And that's something that's very interesting that I remember hearing one of the previous SABs, I think it was the previous Vice President for Boston and London say, which is something very good about these roles as well, is that you can talk to the senior team, as well as that you can talk to people that are, you'll end up working as president with people from advice and counselling, right? People who essentially are just considered everyday staff, but they're actually critical to the student experience. And it helps having that sort of two-dimension, because sometimes it becomes very apparent how much of a gap there is. And I think that's, as president, that's the idea of sort of funneling that back. Sometimes you'll have to essentially, what you say to the principals, not just the students' voices, but also what you've heard from some staff that clearly do not have that same seat at that table that you do.
Completely agree. I actually wanted to add to what you just said. I think it's quite important as well to maybe as well, because we are elected and all this stuff, it can seem a bit threatening, and maybe if we could push like students to go and speak to Colin Bailey and other senior leaders, this will, they can see it firsthand, and I think that's what's happening. It's almost like a bubble there, and we're a separate entity, and it's like there's no connection. I think he needs to see firsthand what we are trying to the issues that are in the university.
I can bring Will in. Did you want to add anything about what do you think is important with the relationship to the Qmsu president and senior execs?
I think the relationships it's of utmost importance. Without having a good relationship, we wouldn't be able to make effective changes. So we need to make sure we have a good relationship, but we also have to be really assertive, because sending emails isn't enough. And
I know that for sure. I know that for sure.
You can send emails and then they wouldn't listen to you. So perhaps in times like those, it will be more effective to bring a force of people, not like an army or a parade of sorts.
Strikes.
Yeah, potentially student strikes, but just being assertive and persistent as well. Because to make real change, you have to keep going at the change. You have to do it consistently, but the relationship as well. You can't build a relationship in one day, and with a new team, then you have to have time to keep on adding to the relationship.
Yeah. Shall we? Has anyone got any questions in the audience?
This year we saw groundbreaking national were sexually assaulted or had experienced sexual harassment. And I wanted to ask how, as president, you know, if each of you get it, how you will deal with issues like this, because then we had the Girls' Night In strikes, which was, you know, an SU thing. And if you're so adamant that the SU is separate from the university, the response to Girls' Night In was slow, basically. So my question to each of you is, as president, when big issues like this come up, what do you feel is the SU's responsibility in handling this, and what do you feel that a response should be?
I think raising awareness is very important. Now, in my manifesto, it does talk about the need to tackle misogyny, sexual violence and sexual harassment. In fact, I've actually got posters around campus right now saying, let's tackle misogyny or let's promote gender equality. I think raising awareness is very important. I think, I'm going to talk from my experience here, I think Students' Union definitely need to do more to basically just promote the hell out of this. So whether it's organising panel events, having posters everywhere, maybe doing like sessions to educate people about it, because it is a really serious issue. Now, I'm talking about this from a male perspective, so I'll be interested to hear what you think as well, because this is something that I think is quite serious. I wonder what women think about this.
This is a subject that really touches home, and also I'm currently women's rep for Mile End, so I've really seen it firsthand, and it's quite distressing. Currently, I'm advocating for more promotion of the Ask for Angela scheme. So our initial idea is not just myself running as currently as women's rep. It's also my another lady called Natasha, and so what we've been doing, we've been having talks, and I do think there needs to be more like communication, because I do feel like there is a lack of communication, and we've constantly been in emails. Munir's had a lot of emails from us as well, and he's been great and helping to advocate. And we've also really found that it's an issue that shouldn't just die down, and that's why it's also in my manifesto, especially like the security and also the cups for in drapers. The couplets, thank you. Like that was something that was in the open letter, and I still haven't seen it. I know like that takes time to be delivered, but that sort of stuff needs to come in quicker for the safety of our students, also for training of security. I know that if security is external, and also to get body security guards as well is like, I know the funding's short, but it's something done for the safety of our students.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, so like, just to, because it's such a serious issue, so like, I'll try to have like some sort of police presence, just to show like the severity of the issue. It's like, so like, having like some police just to like walk around and talk to the students about it, and the fact that you're seeing like a police presence makes the issue, it shows that it's an important issue, and like how devastating it is.
I think I'm gonna, on Amy's point as well, there's a lot of time, so for example, just last week, this was about something, projects being, you know, I think it's called period poverty in terms of free sanitary products. I'm not sure.
That's me.
And it's quite funny because Amy, obviously she mentioned reaching out to Munir, and I think there was sort of one, you know, Munir had also tried getting in contact with someone from the university, from the senior leadership team, and then Radhika, who's the VP Humanities, reached out to another member. And literally we just had a meeting last week where we realised each one of them ran into hurdles, which essentially were blocking each other, right? But each one of them went separate ways. And it's as annoying as it can be, I mean, I never used the word bureaucracy or bureaucratic before this role. The amount of times I've had to use it, right? Because unfortunately that is what we see in the university. There's just so many, you know, this person doesn't speak to this, but you know, a lot of our solutions could easily be solved with that. And I think even, for example, you mentioned funding. That's something that we should be able to sort of just go straight to the university, say, we need funding for X, Y, Z. And there shouldn't be 10 different questions asked. It's as simple as, yes, here it is, right? But we're even in a period, I think this is sort of slightly different, but with the SU in general, we're sort of in a period where the university is very much squeezing on the students' union. So any ask for funding, and suddenly there's 10 questions asked, and it's that idea of that, for example, there's a lot of things where you to ask Colin directly, you will not get, right? It's as simple as that. I think the letters prove that you can't, that won't happen. And sometimes you have to actually speak to those who are, those people who are, for example, someone who's head of student services, try get them involved. The person who's, vice principal for people, culture and inclusion, get them involved and try see, how to sort of, as much as it is politics. It is a politics, it's a political game. And it's trying to figure out that sort of, how to play that political game as well in terms of, that's mainly from university. And I think from the SU as well, just, putting more emphasis in that. And I think we've got so many liberation months going on, so many liberation campaigns, actually just putting more emphasis on where students want those to be. And I think, sometimes it comes where we sort of put so much emphasis in some liberation campaigns and we forget others. And there's nothing here essentially for women. There's no liberation campaign that's specifically about, gender. So there's a lot of sort of, there's much more work that needs to be done. It has to be done from the bottom up, from students, student reps upwards.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting point about asking Colin directly. I think the issue is, I write these letters as just one student or saying, oh, I'm representing these students on my behalf and that. But the thing is, I think what we need to see is schools doing more to work with students, to lobby the uni to basically get on with the job, really. I mean, because as a course rep myself, I've been to these student staff liaison committee meetings, and we say, well, why can't we do this? And they're like, well, just go and get in contact with the principal. Easier said than done. But yeah, I think schools need to do more to work with students to come together to tackle these issues and come together to basically reach out to Bailey and pressure him.
I think even with that, the schools, sometimes you see there's not consistent. There's some schools that do much better in some of these areas. There's some that do horrendously. And it's that, how do we actually replicate, where even this is not just in terms of schools, but rather even in the university, where something is done well, how do we take that and replicate? And that's the idea of sort of, picking up where students are happy and seeing how we can sort of replicate that elsewhere.
I think women's safety should be among our top priorities within the university, and a question about shortage of funding regarding this matter shouldn't even be raised. I think funding from anywhere else and put this on in terms of making sure that women have better safety on campus. Saying this is because even in my manifesto, contact number that will help anyone having an issue in terms of sexual violence or even any sort of, just call that number and have some sort of assistance within a minute to 2 minutes, because we know police in London. So perhaps something within the union, if the union decides to come up with an idea like that, that might really make my manifesto as well.
Can we go back to questions? Anyone got any questions in the room? Yes.
And it's kind of to add on to this, because observing there are 4 men here and 1 woman, and I would say obviously police don't really take sexual violence crimes seriously, so I kind of think it's at the point where we should be re-educating people and putting it across campus. So how far have all of you educated yourself on the issues that the university is facing with women's harassment, and especially Addie, considering you've been in the role and the position, what have you noticed that's come up empty-handed, and what hasn't been resolved and what hasn't been addressed that needs to be addressed by the president in the next term?
Yeah. Can I just to remove the bit, just direct to one person, if that's all right? Just
Oh, yeah.
No, you're fine. Same question, just the same. What have you done each to educate yourself on those issues, and sort of compared to what's been done this year, would you do next year? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think I know. Am I allowed to still? I'm going to jump on my experience as well. I think with the president, because of how much also there is scope in there, so in terms of actions here, right? So this is less so the education, more so the actual actions being done. for me, it was very much, I remember being asked this last year's debates about, in terms of how about going about the role in general. And it was very much that I can never be, I can never say I understand how it is to be a woman, right? And I think that's something that's critical and something that's important. And you mentioned, of course, that, diversity, for example, that on the panels and candidates. And I think it's actually highlighting and empowering those who can, this year, for example, it's really good to see that our sabbatical officer team this year was very much split. So when it comes to these issues, it's essentially also, although the VP welfare was male, but, he works with the reps who are addressing these stuff, who are, essentially very close to the scene in that regards, and trying to help the VP welfare empower them as well as always turning to the sabbatical officers who have had these experiences, and seeing what they think is the best way forward, because I don't think me saying this is what I think is best makes sense, because I have no right to do so, and I think that's sort of a big thing that I think, with all sort of the communities and diversity that we have in our students, we have to be very careful not to say that, I'll do, that I can relate to all these experiences, because we can't. And that's where it comes to actually going to those who are the closest people, and how those people leading that sort of aspect, and how can we support them. So that's sort of been the focus for me so far in this time. And I think that's what I think is mainly important, because it's the idea of, empowering those who actually have, who will be the ones leading that area and that work. Yeah.
I think it's how I've learned to educate myself about this issue. Now, have I educated myself enough? I'm not really sure, because I don't think the Students' Union does enough to promote this issue, and raise awareness about it. And again, onto my previous point, maybe working with societies like the Qmsu Feminist Society to basically run panel events. I mean, I'm in the process of organising a panel event myself at the moment. I think having panel discussions, roundtable discussions, are really good opportunities for people to educate themselves about these issues.
So as I said previously, actually being women's rep, it's very hard, in terms of I've had that first-hand experience of having students talk to me, and all I can do is refer them as well to the report and support, because which I do believe needs to be improved massively. Anyways, what was sorry, I just lost my train of thought. In regards to us, we've probably got about maybe 100 to 200. The university is massive. So I do feel like the student union could do more to support as societies, also not even just women, those who identify as women. And I do think that sorry, my train of thought is completely gone. I do believe that the university needs to support the sabbatical officers, like the women's rep, and actually promote events. So, for example, I did Islamophobia Awareness Month, but it was for surrounding women, and it was promoted. And I think if there was more promotion and more talk amongst other students, and where sabbatical officers and myself, if I was to be president, I would love to be involved in these events and hear other students' opinions and their experiences, because that's where the heart is. That's what this is about. Everything here, we're listening to the students' voices. Their experiences should be first, and we don't want anyone to walk away from Queen Mary's having a bad experience.
I think one of my most recent experiences that I had that allowed me to deeply think and that is when I started speaking to that was an opportunity for me to really, I want to fully understand how some of the people that went through these situations really felt. Should be that you try to always educate yourself and make sure.
Yeah, sorry, I agree with you, Kazi. So I don't think the SU is doing enough to spread like awareness on this issue. But like to answer your question, Royce, like what I've personally done is I always talk to my friends and like I always try to get them to share their experience with me, even though like it could be like a sensitive topic. I always try to just like if they're willing, like just to share their feelings with me and just to like know what they've personally been through. But yeah, like if the SU had like done more, maybe like more people would know, more people would be like more aware on this issue.
Definitely something that needs to be constantly brought up as well, because it's not just a phase. This goes with everything. It's not just a phase. It's not like, you know, even with the open letter, everyone joined together. It was amazing, and my inbox was filled. And, I'm sure that other officers also had their inboxes filled. But after that kind of went away, there was no talk about it. It should be something that is continuously brought up until there is change.
Can we move back to questions? Has anyone got any questions? Charlie?
Yeah, first off, thanks for everyone answering. That was quite a sensitive topic. I just wanted to move away from that for a second. Obviously, as president next year, you'll be running the Qmsu. What do you personally think is the single biggest issue you'll be facing as president next year? And what makes you do that?
I think it's the way students are being treated by the senior leadership. Simple as that. They don't listen. I mean, I talk to students on my course in particular in politics, and we've just been completely ignored. So I think we've got to find ways to get senior leaders out there talking to students. Yeah, that's exactly what they need to do, really.
I think, I mean, the first thing that, when you asked your question, the first thing that came to mind was, you know, there's a list. You know, to choose one is quite hard. I think one that's very important is in terms of how do we engage with all our students, right? There's so many, we speak about diversity and sometimes we focus on certain aspects one at a time, aren't really looking into. There's you know, a few that were mentioned earlier in some of the previous you know, candidate question time, you know, questions, but whether it's, you know, faith, whether it's campuses, you know, those are two different aspects of diversity that we don't, how are we really engaged? So I think before this year, there was no advice and counselling service provision at Whitechapel, right? If there's none at Whitechapel, what's going on with, you know, Charterhouse Square? What about all the different campuses we have? What about in Paris? You know, there's the aspect of sometimes our work is very focused on small groups of students or small target audiences. I think that's one thing that we definitely need to work on, right? Amongst an array of many, is that how many students really feel that either Qmsu or BLSA really stands for them. And I think that's one important thing that, you know, that I've been working on it for a few months, and it's something that just goes on and on and on. I mean, I've been involved in the Students' Union for coming to 4 years now in various different roles, and it's been here from the first day of my degree all the way till now, right? It's something that constantly is being asked, and the question is, you know, how do we actually get students more engaged? How do we get students more into this sort of aspect of, you know, into the Students' Union, into feeling that their voices matter? And frankly, you know, most people don't know what the Students' Union is, right? They don't know how it works, they don't know what it is, they don't know the structure, they don't know anything, right? And especially with my role being president this year, sometimes we joke with this, amongst sabbatical officers that I'm a governance freak, which is not exactly the nicest title to have, but you know, that's, as president, you're sort of looking at that governance. But the problem is, as president, you're looking at this complicated governance and you can try and understand it. We've got 28,000 students, more even. how many of them will really care about looking into the governance of students' union and what it means and how they can get involved, right? And it's that idea of trying to sort of make that much simpler, that every student has the ability to get involved very easily, whether that's, we have our representatives, we have all these things, the part-time roles, the full-time roles, the operational roles. How do we, that's one way of getting involved. For the students, even one step below that, right? How do we get them engaged? Because we're in elections right now, and it's something that's very interesting, is that most of the people that will vote, right, the hard truth is they won't know anything about us in a few months' time. They don't care, they won't look at us, that's just how it works, right? And it's frightening to say that 15% of our students or 20% of our students vote, and then a good portion of that don't even follow the students' union, right? And so it's very much the idea of, how do you simplify the process, looking outside. And we had a democracy review as a students' union 2 years ago. I wasn't really involved then. And has it worked? Is our structure, in terms of that issue of students, there's so many words, there's so much jargon that goes on. How do we get students to actually feel that they understand what's going on in students' union and they want to get involved, right? It shouldn't be the case that every election we have to push for people to get, to be interested in the elections to vote, when really it should be something that it's natural to them because they're concerned about their welfare, their, academia and so on and so forth.
I think interesting question. Personally, that I haven't really fully thought about all the struggles I'm going to go through being the president throughout the year. It was very tempting, especially because from the day I was interested in signing up to be the president is from that very day, there wasn't a blueprint that was laid out as to what, if you want to be the voice of the union, apply to be the president, right? So I think it's a very important role, but the blueprint has not been laid out. So I think personally that trying to do everything that I have mentioned in my manifesto, I'm trying to transition into this challenge. So this is what I've been thinking throughout the day, to be honest.
Yeah. I have to agree that there isn't much info on what the president actually does and what you would do if you stand in the election. So I want to use my presidency to just launch campaigns about important issues, launch campaigns about tackling misogyny, launch campaigns about improving student mental health, launch campaigns about reducing social isolation, launch campaigns about raising awareness about healing disabilities, including autism, which no one ever talks about, it feels like, ADHD, dyslexia, and everything really. That's what I want to use it for, just launching campaigns.
One more thing I just want to add. I had a conversation earlier today with Adi and the current sabbatical officers regarding this. I think part of the reason why they want to run again is because they had a bit of time when they started trying to understand the role itself. Again, going back to the point, there should be a blueprint for every role laid out, just as any other job position you apply to.
I think definitely I understand where you're coming from. I think, I agree with it partly because, there are aspects where you don't want to take so long trying to fit into the role. The only problem is that with this, the whole idea is that, for example, every president comes with something new. So we also have to be careful in terms of a blueprint to make sure it's not too restricting, because even us five sat here today, I think each one of us would do presidency very, very different. I think back to that conversation with Kazi, I would recommend to anyone who gets elected, if you do win, I do think you should just consider perhaps from the beginning of the year, and it says very, very early on, I don't even know if I should be saying this, consider running for a second year, only because I sort of said that to Kazi where I said, I remember one sabbatical officer, I can't remember if it was at Queen Mary a few years ago, if it was someone else from another university, who said to me, you spend 6 months settling into the role, getting to grips with everything, and 6 months you know your success and you're already leaving, and you're counting down your days. So it's a one, sabbatical officer, these sabbatical officer roles, this presidency is very different to other things, but I think there isn't a blueprint because, you have to figure out how you want this presidency to be, envision what you want it to be, and I think that's very important because, whoever gets elected, I think, shape it as much as you want it to be, and and at the same time pass it on for the person that comes after, for them to be able to shape it the way they want as well. I know we're steering a bit off your question, Charlie. I'm really sorry about that, but yeah, go back there.
Yeah, I agree with Addy. So if I became president, I would want to build a strong culture where everyone feels engaged. So like right now, when you have this is the first day of election, and only 2% of all students have voted, and the first day should be the most engaging day, where most students should cast a ballot, have their say. But currently, it just seems students are not engaged. So I just want to improve the engagement of every student at the university.
Okay. Shall we go back to questions? Anyone got any questions? No. Oh.
It's okay. Just
Sorry.
No, sorry. I just wanted to reiterate your question because we did go off.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to kind of, in your opinion, what the single biggest issue that would affect the QMSU next year, and obviously as president, by extension yourself, and what would you do about it?
Okay, so yeah, everyone has touched on the point of, it is, as Addy said, how you want it to be shaped, but also it's also the whole student union and the students are, their experience as well as how your president that should be. So for example, going back to, I keep referring to women's rep, but when I was in women's rep, it was very hard to know where to start. And in my manifesto, I know that I looked back at my women's rep one. I was like, where do I start, and which one do I advocate first? And I think I went round asking students what they felt was most important. And first of all, two of them was also the security, but also the period products, free period products, and tackling period poverty. And I think that's where I would go. I wouldn't do what I think's best. I would want to ask students and ask them what they really feel needs to be tackled first.
Sorry about that, Amy.
It's alright.
It's a little difficult to track. I'm really sorry. No, I'm really sorry. Shall we go back to questions? Anyone got any questions in the room? Yeah.
So you all spoke about but what about the students that they're not comfortable being in person? What are the ways that you help to facilitate?
This is a point on my manifesto that I would like to introduce, and I would like to introduce an anonymous forum where people can put up their issues or things they may be tackling with, and they remain anonymous. And it also allows other people to feel like there's someone else in their position, and so I do feel like that would be a good start.
I think it's something interesting is that also, before I diverge, and I hope I try not to, is that, recently, for example, anything that's passed in student council, right? Sorry, going back to governance. After 2 years, it comes back to student council so they can choose whether to, we still need to work on this or it's been done and gone. And we looked at it recently, and there was something where actually there was an idea about 2 years ago about having a page on the SU website where it was, either you submitting a motion, being able to ask for just an idea, or actually having stuff, sort of anonymously suggest some things. And the problem is that it's clearly not, it still needs a lot of work. It's hidden somewhere on the website, which is always already a bad start. And I think it's that trying to sort of find what we do have and being able to bring that out and actually work on it. And I think it's also, the strange thing is that with these roles, there's always so many things that you can pick up. And I think one of them, for example, is course reps. And how close course reps are, and think about the number of course reps we have. How close a course rep is to all these students is much closer than president ever will be. And it's how do you sort of, that's why I sort of, how do you go to the structure? How do you, see where clearly there's some stuff that needs to be improved? How do you empower the course reps to actually be able to bring those voices, right? Because it happens a few times where you sort of get an email from a course rep that says, 2 students spoke to me and there's this issue, but it doesn't happen enough, right? And so, firstly, are they being supported? I mean, can't remember who it was, I'm really sorry, but someone mentioned about SSLCs, and how sometimes, you know, you're in there and you don't feel like much is happening. There's the idea of support from the university for course reps to actually feel like they have a voice, as well as, especially from our side, how do we prepare course reps, how do we train them up, how do we actually get them to understand the fact that they've got a responsibility, which is to be there for students, to be the student voice as well in that level, to be able to, you know, propagate it. And I think and definitely, you know, Amy's idea, that's in terms of, you know, having that sort of a way for anonymous feedback to come back, there's clearly work that needs to be done there as well.
I think there's no really very creative solutions you can come for this other than reach out and address whatever they're going through.
I think what is good is the president has to use the societies as a way to reach out to students, because obviously there's thousands of students that are members of societies. I think there could be like a great connection between the executive officers and the students. So we've got to reach out to them, because I doubt there's many students that come to the executive officers. So I think it's their job to reach out to students, really.
Yeah, so I'll probably hand out tasks. So so for example, maybe build a team of volunteers, or like a group of course reps, for example, and then give them tasks to go out to students, just to get feedback. And it doesn't just have to be course reps as well. It could be any students in the class. So maybe I'll ask lecturers in the class to ask students for feedback specifically, and then the students might be more willing to speak their thoughts. And I guess that's the main point, right? You try to create this environment where the students that are less willing to speak. So I think through letting the course reps go directly to the students and trying to encourage the course reps to talk to them will solve this matter.
I think so perhaps promoting that more, or trying to get them to expand more, so that every Queen Mary student can pair up or be in a triplet where it's their safe bubble and they can speak about whatever they want. They cost us more, but can be done within ourselves just by communicating.
Oh, no, I was going to say I actually did the buddy scheme in first year, and I didn't actually feel it was beneficial. I never saw those people again, and so I would tackle it that way. I would probably, I've always felt like the people that I've met in this university experience through societies and even just in my roles, and I do feel like if there's more events that can also allow people to kind of come together, maybe not just just a social event where not maybe promoted talk about your issues, not like that, but just an event where people can come together and just meet new people. And then when people start to meet new people and meet even the executive officers as well. So I think I saw have a coffee with the executive officers. I think if there's more interaction between the officers and students, that allows them to build a relationship, and people can come and discuss their issues and stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say something before, which is not so much to the question as much as it was to the buddy scheme, which was BL have an interesting thing which I believe is most successful, called Mummies and Daddies, which I find a very interesting concept, which I don't think has ever been looked into in terms of if it would work in my land. It's a very interesting concept, to be honest. It's just, yeah, it's probably a different way of doing buddy scheme, but I've never really thought about how that would work in my land. But I feel like that's something that definitely deserves to be looked into. Buddy scheme, sorry, that was a very good point. But yeah.
Is there any other questions? Are there any questions in the room? Yeah.
That's going to come up. I haven't done about by the COVID second year, so no strikes then. But third year, more strikes. What can presidents do about supporting strikes, but also helping students who aren't getting education for their pay?
Most relevant here. I think it's so. Firstly, the president actually does meet with the UCU branch chair. So you do meet with the head of UCU in Queen Mary, and I've had several meetings and several discussions. And I think in terms of firstly supporting, making sure, because as oddly as it sounds, as a students' union, you have a better channel to the senior leadership team than any of our unions do, or the other unions do, right? It's just, that's how it is. And, essentially getting that message across of why they're striking and making sure that they're actually listening in on it. And in terms of, with regards to students, and I think for me it's quite interesting because I think for third year students this year, first year there were strikes, second year there was a pandemic, in case anyone missed it, and then third year there was more strikes, right? And I think in previous years, for example, there was, for us it was the first thought was, what do our students think? And we sort of pushed it towards an annual members meeting where all students could essentially come and talk and vote. And in terms of how we took that. But it was, so we always, in terms of with the university, there was very much a two approach. There was firstly, make sure that they, the causes, we said to them, every single student we have spoken to, right, without fail, has supported the causes of the strikes, right? But as equally as important is that the amount of students who have clearly stressed they are very worried about, their education and what the effect is. And it's not, there's some students, and I think it's, I don't want to talk about UCU because that's not my right, but it's just that, there's the idea of students are impacted by the strikes, and that's part of the process, that's part of the whole idea. But some students are very, there was that concern to university, okay, what's the university doing about this? And, the university somehow went to the extreme of docking pay, which until now I'm sort of scratching my head about. So it's that making sure firstly that the causes are clearly getting through, then ensuring that the student concern, what are the mitigations being put in place for students? Are students still being taught that content? If for some reason they're not being taught that content, are they going to be examined on it, right? And at the same time, for example, talking to UCU, seeing how we can support them whilst still making sure that whatever the students ask for, that's what we do. So for example, after discussions with UCU, there's the entrance on Bancroft Road is actually much less, the picket line is much less staffed because that's how students can get to the advice and counselling, right? And UCU have been very sort of open with us and very, considerate in terms of the way that they picket. It's not aggressive at all, and at Bancroft Road, they're very much decided to put very few people there so students can get to advice and counselling. So I think there's sort of multiple layers to it. It's not, I think it was mentioned in one of the previous discussions, it's not something that's going to go anytime soon. There's the 4 fights, which that's a bit more, Queen Mary probably can fix, and we need to be lobbying about that. And there's the pensions, which honestly is, I've tried to get into it, tried to understand it. It is a very complex matter, and I do not see it being solved anytime soon, unfortunately. So it's something that's going to keep coming up, and I think it's just making sure that we are consistently listening to students, what do they want us to do, and at the same time making sure that both the welfare of the academics and the welfare of students is the utmost priority of the university at all times.
I think first year, the way we were impacted because of the strikes, we're at a much better place now, thanks to MME. Right now, what we experience is whenever teachers, professors are going on strike, we're able to shift the lectures and seminars online right away. So, in terms of missing out content, we're not really missing out. They're being uploaded regularly. So I think most students, if they are still not happy with the situation, I think what we're looking for is monetary compensation. This is one of the hardest things to get out of. So trying to get some back from the pocket is one. Pushing the senior management in the university to look at students that are being directly affected and affected for a really long time to be compensated in some way. But
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It is monetary compensation, that's the issue. So I'm talking to many students about this, and they're all pretty much saying the same thing, that we've not had the educational experience that was sold to us. I mean, we had this blended learning last year, which was another way of saying learning that was going to be entirely online. But for the same price, though, so don't worry, even though you can go to the Open University, for example, and pay much less. So yeah, that's definitely one issue. Another issue is that I don't think schools take into consideration enough the pressure students are under with all these situations going on with COVID, with the strikes. So for example, I think deadlines should be moved straight away if there's a strike, or if there's a pandemic, then they should be more lenient. I think schools have been more lenient in terms of the pandemic, but in terms of the strikes, schools need to do more to be more lenient on students when it comes to deadlines. So a lot of students in politics and international relations have been talking about the fact that the dissertation deadline hasn't been moved yet. And what their argument is, we're not going to move it because looking at past years, dissertation grades are just fine. So we're not going to move it for you guys. We've had probably one of the worst experiences, I can tell you, ever in terms of uni. So again, I've written a letter to them. I'm waiting for a response. But yeah, I think Qmsu has a responsibility to lobby schools to be more lenient on students when it comes to deadlines.
I think the standpoint they have is that even if students don't want to continue with us, we have other students that are willing to come in and pay full, even when, you know,
I agree with Adam, but I think like to help your understanding, I think it will be good to like introduce student-led seminars for like humanities subjects, and this will like really increase like your understanding of your course. And for like perhaps like engineering sciences, you could have like a senior student to try to like help you understand new concepts in your learning. But this is like so obviously I agree with like Adam on like you should get compensated in some way.
Yeah. I think just final point I guess is like Kazi was saying that, you know, doesn't think this will be solved before next term. I really hope it is. But I guess that's just wishful thinking for now.
I do think as well that there should be more promotion of like what the strikes are about, and I think there's not enough of that. So when I was at the union shop today because I was working, I actually spoke to one of the people who were striking, and I mentioned about their booklet, and I said, oh, it was really engaging. He said it was actually made by students. It wasn't actually made by them. It was made by students, and I think that in itself is so important. Like, if we learn about why they're striking as well, I think that will really help. But in terms of education, we've been affected massively, and frankly, but one thing I do find that's been quite helpful recently is like some of my lecturers had put up what the online lectures that they did from last year, because a lot of the content repeats. So I think like even if they did a pre-recorded lecture, I know that's a lot of work for them, but even if they could put out content that way, that would be great. Or maybe do shift it in a way that maybe it's student-led discussions. So it's about your subject, and then you can discuss, like students can have discussions about it, about maybe say it's about their dissertation. Students can have discussions with each other and give each other feedback. Obviously that's not the greatest because but just some little things that could be implemented. But I think it is going to be tricky. If I was elected, I would try my best to listen to everyone's views and try my best to get it to get it sorted, but yeah, it's not going to be easy.
So if there's one more question of anyone burning in the audience. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna wrap up with one final one of myself. I'm gonna do like last year's Qmsu President Shamima did, use my chair power to end on a question that I picked. And it's the same question that she asked. The Qmsu President is a leader. You're a leader of a team, you're a leader of many reps beneath you, you're a leader amongst, how many students do we have? 20-something thousand? 20 and a bit thousand, maybe 30,000, maybe more. You're a leader amongst all those students. What is your leadership style and why is it suited to being Qmsu President?
Being approachable, just being approachable, talking to students is really important. So I've had like many leadership opportunities in the past. I've been the president of the London Transport Society, I was a buddy scheme mentor, I led past mentoring sessions, I was a course rep. I think it's all about being approachable, listening to students, talking to them. That's what they really want from their leader and their president.
Shall I go? I think what makes a good leader is a good balance between idealism and realism. That, I mean, you start off being a president with all the ideas you have, but then once you become the president, you need to regularly communicate with students from all kinds of societies, all kinds of departments, be it a student who has a leadership role or even just a regular student who's coming to Queen Mary for the degree only. So I think what I believe will make this role successful is when a president can and use their ideas at the same time and try to sort of merge both together and come up with solutions to problems they face during their leadership. I think that's what it's going to be.
I do think, like in my previous roles, like leadership roles and stuff, I do believe that being approachable, as Adam said, is really key. Just being that friendly figure that people feel like they can come to, share their issues to. You don't want to go to someone that's not going to listen. Also, making the time, no matter what, you'll make that time for them, because if someone's busy and you don't make that time, they're likely going to walk away. So it's about making that time for the students, no matter how busy you are, and also listening to them and acting upon that, and just being approachable and friendly, and yeah.
I think to be a good leader, you have to be nurturing. So people don't always know what they want to do, and to be a good leader means you should guide them and help them, and when they're confused, try to unwind the confusion, and just step by step making sure that others know exactly what they're doing, and over time this will accumulate, and then they'll be able to carry their roles effectively.
I think I'll probably give the same answer I did last year in terms of leadership style. I think for me, it's empowerment in one word. And I think it's because it's taken me 7 months. So something that people, people don't appreciate about the role until you're sort of in there is the fact that you're a sabbatical officer. There are 5 other sabbatical officers. Each one of you has enough on your plate to do, to work 24/7 and still not finish. The whole work-life balance, let's talk about that another day. But, the idea of I've said it even to the university before, where I've said, if we had 12 sabbatical officers, it still would not be enough, right? That's just how the nature of the role. And as well as that, as president, you're actually at the base, the basic level, the first level, the minimum, is to support the other sabbatical officers, which is quite interesting because, you're supposed to be there as well to help them through the roles when you're struggling to settle in yourself. And so it's that idea of, even looking back at my 7 months, I most definitely have come a long way. And even now, I'm not at a level where I'm happy that I, feel like I'm providing that level of support that I would be, happy to give. But it's the idea of one student cannot give, cannot justify that right, or cannot give that right of representing 30,000 students by themselves. there's a reason that the president is the leader of the SU, the reason that they are the face, but you know they're there to essentially enact what the students want as a whole, and that's it's sort of that idea of, like I said earlier, from the bottom all the way up, and if you start from the top, that doesn't it won't work, it won't be effective, and it's the idea of trying to essentially firstly with the rest of the sabbatical officers, and then in terms of the governance, going down the part-time roles, the part-time officers, the regular students, course reps, societies. There's so much to work on, so much in terms of that empowerment, right? I think Amy mentioned it earlier, the societies being those people who, a lot of students, their connection to the SU, they don't realize they have a connection. The only connection is the societies. And that's essentially empowering them, empowering everyday students that by the time they leave the university, it's not just their degree that they've, acquired, but rather the skills, that empowerment, and that way of going about it. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be, it takes a while to hone, and I think it's something that you need to hone and essentially, improve constantly in terms of how are you able to support those right next to you, those representatives, and essentially make sure that that is cascaded the whole way through the student union and the whole way through the student body.
So thank you very much for the conversations we've had tonight. We're going to move on to 1 minute closing statements. Let's, if that's all right, just go down the line. So 1 minute as a closing statement.
Queen Mary has given me the 3 most intense years of my life. Started off being a very confused, struggling second year, and then eventually a very ambitious final. Been in roles such as the president of a sporting club and a treasurer, first year course rep for my degree. I feel like I have seen a lot of things within the last 3 years to get together the confidence I have now and really be able to say that I'm well suited to be the president of this union. And therefore, I would urge everyone to vote for me, even if it's not me. It is very important for us to vote. So, yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Amy, a 1 minute closing statement.
Yeah. I've always just been passionate of helping other people. Ever since, I know this sounds cringy, but since I was young, I've always just put myself out there in volunteering and just helping others and just making people smile and making their experience just better. And I feel like this role is just a perfect opportunity to do that. And if I was elected, I'll be so excited to help shape students' experience for the better. And I do feel like, as Adi touched upon, even as the women's rep position, I feel like there's a lot of unfinished business that needs to happen, and I do think that I would love to touch on all my manifesto points as much as I can and give the best student experience for everyone.
Fab. And Adam, a 1 minute closing statement.
Thank you. So I want to use this as an opportunity to basically say to Colin Bailey that you've kind of let us down, really. I mean, I want to get him to come to the School of Politics and International Relations. In fact, I want him to get him to come to all the faculties in Humanities and Social Sciences. And I want him to talk to students about how they feel about their university experience. Because I tell you, we've been let down. We deserve compensation. We just deserve some recognition, really. I mean, yeah, absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, vote Adam, and every week I will say to him, look, come and talk to us, give us our money back, really. I wish it was that easy. But yeah, I mean, so that's my message, especially for final year politics and international relations students who've been let down by this university and let down by our leaders. I'm sorry to say that.
And that's time. Fab, and if we can move to you, Will, for a 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm passionate, I'm driven, and I wouldn't hesitate to make the changes that you deserve. And in life, my slogan, if you need help, I'll be there.
And Adi, for a 1 minute closing statement.
The president is the face of our union. They oversee a huge range of strategic, operational, and a huge amount of objectives that they have to oversee as the president, and they have to be the chair of the board of trustees. They have to support the other SABs. They have to, they're the first person that's essentially looked towards as soon as governance is mentioned, whatever that means. I've been involved in the Students' Union now coming to 4 years. I was a first year rep in my first year, so I know what student council is. I was a student trustee for 2 years, and I'm now president this year. Every single experience was different. Every single insight was different. And they put me in a place where I've now learned so much from so many different experiences to try effectively, moving forward, effectively do what's best for our students. Please vote me. Thank you very much.
Very well done, everyone.
This is where we go.
I just very quickly want to say thank you for tonight. Thank you to the candidates and the other people who've come to support in the room, and thank you to the Student Union staff for helping me run tonight. As you know, voting for elections is open now. You can go to qmsu.org/elections to vote, and voting closes at 4 p.m. this Thursday, and then results are Thursday, 7:30 at Draper's. I hope you will come. And really, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.